Attention all players. It is now time for the next game.
What lengths would you go to for $4.56 million? What conditions will you withstand?
Well, according to the letters of claim sent to the producer of Squid Game, The Challenge, some contestants suffered multiple injuries due to the poor health and safety standards on set, and they are not happy. So today, you and I are going to break down Squid Game, The Challenge, and its legal drama. Let's get started. First, let's tackle the biggest misconception surrounding this entire ordeal. Everyone keeps throwing around the word lawsuit, but most articles are being pretty clear to clarify that no lawsuit has yet been filed. So what's actually going on? Well, what actually happened is that two former players have sent something called a letter of claim to one of the producers of the game show. Now, lawyers in the US don't call the letter of claim by that name. We call it a demand letter, but let's get real. It's the same thing. Not everyone who sues a company sends a demand letter first, and not everyone who first sends a demand letter later sues someone. In my past life, in a land and a time before YouTube, when I was just a simple caveman lawyer, we rarely sent demand letters, we just sued. And here's why. Some types of claims can't legally be resolved by agreement unless a lawsuit is filed and the settlement is overseen by a judge. There are other types of claims that have to be settled with oversight from government agencies rather than courts. But in either case, a demand letter doesn't really get the ball moving in the right direction. But there are many claims for which a demand letter or letter of claim is a great strategy because it starts a conversation about early settlement. What's interesting in this particular situation is that the only reason that you and I know about this letter of claim is that it was publicized by the lawyers for the claimants. The letter of claim is not a public document, and in fact, if Squid Games weren't famous, I can't imagine in an ordinary scenario anyone would ever know that this letter was sent, because you have to have someone who's seeking publicity in order to get the word out. And that's not a legal strategy, that's a PR strategy. I don't mean to criticize it by calling it that. It's just not something that has anything to do with the legal system. As far as I know, as far as the internet knows, aka Google, this letter of claim has not been released to the public. Now, we do have a fair amount of details, including the fact that the potential plaintiffs are basing their potential claims on the injuries that they say they sustained playing red light, green light, namely hypothermia and nerve damage. So how bad does it have to be before you can get paid for it? As we all assume, when a corporate giant, a behemoth, such as Netflix is involved, a mountain of paperwork was almost certainly signed, which definitely included a liability waiver for every single person who participated in the game. But is that waiver as ironclad as Netflix would like you and me to believe? In hopes that someone will make my very own It Depends compilation, it depends. Let's start with a couple of assumptions. Number one, these release and waiver agreements are going to have been written by the best lawyers and iterated upon dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the years, which means that from a legal standpoint, they're gonna be valid. They're gonna be worded really well. But then you have to analyze whether the types of injuries involved are the results of some type of claim that is not releasable or waivable, such as an infliction of an intentional injury, or, as I have said on this channel before, some sort of wanton negligence or gross negligence. Just disgusting negligence. And now we turn to the question of all questions. Does this letter of claim work? To answer that question, we must look at the goal of the claimants. The goal of these people is to get that cash. But actually, the short answer to the question of whether the letter of claim works is whether the letter by itself will get them that money. In my experience as a YouTube lawyer and an IRL lawyer, my guess is that it will not. However, a longer answer involves examining whether the making of the initial demand advances the possibility of reaching the result that the plaintiffs have in mind of eventually getting paid. And the answer to that question is yes, it certainly moves things in that direction. As you may have already concluded, the two plaintiffs who are complaining, or rather I should say potential plaintiffs because they haven't actually sued, Those two people who are complaining about the conditions represent less than 0.5% of all of the participants, all of whom went through the exact same scenario. And if you call my office right now, you can make it 1.5%. If you or a loved one was injured in a Netflix game show, or if you just got really, really, really cold outside one time, call me now. Call now. Call now. Call now. Wow. And since they are the only two so far who are claiming to be aggrieved or injured in any way, it stands to reason that no jury or court is going to find that the conduct that they endured from Netflix was wantonly negligent or grossly negligent, or certainly not intentional. The numbers around that lack of participation by the other members of the game is a giant hurdle for the claimants to overcome in their case. Of course, it doesn't help them that the other participants in the game have publicly said that while it was in fact quite cold, anyone could leave the game at any time and medics were standing by.
What were the resources available?
If there's people all around us at all times. So I mean, and we were supposed to raise our hand and yell medic if we were in trouble or too uncomfortable or frankly just didn't want to continue.
What is your response to the contestants who are online complaining about the conditions?
I mean, I think it's the dumbest thing ever.
There is a defense to legal claims, most legal claims, called consent, which stands for the proposition that if you choose to do something, then you can't blame someone else for the fact that you did it. Now, that is an affirmative defense, which if it's proven means you get 0, you lose. And they chose to stay in the game. There are some jurisdictions in which just before you file a claim, you must send a demand letter. And still even more jurisdictions in which if you fail to serve a demand letter on a defendant before filing your suit, you lose the right to make certain claims, or to put it another way, your claims lose some of their value. So it's not a bad idea for them to send a letter of claim here in this particular instance. Of course, the lawyers for these claimants know that not only is the show well-funded, but there's always at least one layer, if not up to 10 layers of potential liability insurance policies that will pay out if there has been unwaived or unwaivable negligence. As you know, litigation is terribly expensive. And for that reason, lots of claims just like these are often settled on a theory of the economics of the transaction called nuisance value. What that means is that when a prospective defendant views itself as having no chance of losing in court, but still having to spend or waste money on the cost of its lawyers in defense of those claims it would ultimately win, it becomes financially advantageous to resolve the claims as early as possible, but for very low dollar values, hence the name nuisance. No one should be surprised if in this particular instance, the participants receive small payouts with the producers of the show never admitting that they actually did anything wrong. In fact, it makes a lot of sense to expect that when the very premise of the show is that people are willing to give away money to other people who willingly behave stupidly, that they might get paid for making these bad claims. It's a little bit meta. But for all we know, paying out even the smallest bit of money to these contestants could lead to an avalanche effect in which all contestants who lost decide to try and get at least a little bit of money to show that they suffered also. But there are a lot of factors to weigh in a decision like this. So why don't you weigh in? Drop down in the comments below and tell me your pro se opinion. If you're Netflix, would you spend the money fighting the letter of claim or a lawsuit, or do you just pay out a little bit to get rid of the problem? Shockingly enough, this is not my first Squid Games video. So if you want more challenge content, you gotta check out this video right here. As a subscriber, wait, you're not subscribed? Why not? You made it all the way to the end of this video. I thought you liked my content. This makes no sense. I said contestants. But is that waiver as ironclad as Netflix? And now you can make it 1 pint.